This is one of the best $100 PC cases that you can currently buy, and I might even just say it's the best out there. This is the brand new Phanteks G400A, and it's a full tower ATX case that is taking after the old P400A, which Phanteks actually sold a ton of. That was one of my favorite PC cases that they ever released. It was awesome because it was super affordable, it had great ventilation up front, came usually with 3 or 4 fans, had a lot of premium features that you wouldn't get unless you spent double at the time, and honestly, Phanteks carried all of those traits over to this brand new case. So, like I said, this is a full tower ATX case. This is not a small case by any means. It is larger than the Phanteks P400A, so there are some things that you will need to consider here. The width is quite larger. This is supporting up to 140mm fans up front, so there's a lot of room there. And the reason why they also opened the width a little bit is that allows for support for larger GPUs, which as we get into these new series of 50 series GPUs, which sound like they're going to be quite large, we're going to need an additional width for the actual GPU itself. That's why they made this case a little bit wider. This gives you support so you could still have a wide GPU, still have your PCIe cable or your 12+4 pin cables coming off the GPU without worrying about them getting crushed. The case also has support for eATX motherboards, which is actually pretty cool. A lot of cases at this price point don't have support for them, so if you do want to get a larger motherboard, you do have support for that. And you can always go smaller with something like a micro ATX or a mini ITX. But if you're buying a case like this, get an ATX motherboard or eATX. There is support up to 280mm, so that should give you plenty of support there. Speaking of support, this case comes with quite a bit of support when it comes to fans. Up front, you actually get 3 included 140mm M25 140 Gen 2 fans. These are the brand new fans from Phanteks, and they actually hook up to the new Nexlink system that I'll get to in a little bit. There's also another one in the rear, and these are actually daisy chainable fans. They're not the ones that just snap together with magnets like we've seen from Thermaltake or Lee & Lee or any of the other brands that have kind of all copied the same design. These ones actually lock together and actually are tightened down with the screw, which keeps them very secure and locked in place. So they're a pretty solid option, and they are a nice fan, and thanks to some of the new features that they have, they're pretty cool. In addition to that, for cooling, you get support for up to a 360mm radiator up top, which is really what this case is designed for. If you do want to go with the air cooler, there's plenty of support there, but for a 360mm AIO, that's probably the route you're going to want to go. It has a very easy installation method with a nice little panel for the ventilation that pops off very easily, so getting to your screw mounts are very nice there. And there's actually a ton of room and clearance, so you can even have one of those thicker radiators, something like the ones that come from Arctic if you want to go with that, and you shouldn't have any clearance issues. Additional to that, if you do want to have additional cooling, the bottom power supply basement is fully ventilated. And the reason why they have it fully ventilated is that you can install another 320mm fans down below to have direct airflow going straight to that GPU. You probably want to do reverse fan blades here. The reason for that is you still want to look at the pretty side of the fans and actually have that airflow go up towards the GPU, which is going to be super effective as we see these new 50 series GPUs about to be released. Now, speaking of the power supply basement, down here you got ample room for storage if you do want to go with anything besides M.2 drives. Most people are just using M.2 these days, but if you do want to use a 3.5-inch drive, you can fit 2 down here, or you can also do 2 2.5-inch drives and 1 3.5-inch drive, or if you are just doing 2.5-inch SSDs or something like that. You honestly have plenty of room down here to stack them, and the support for power supplies here is really good. The only thing that may be a limitation is this lip here, so if you do have a really long power supply, it may be hard to slide it in, but with this 1000-watt unit that I installed, there was no problem. There's plenty of rooms to actually tuck your cables down here if you want to, or if you have extras or you're not using a modular power supply. So it's really easy to build in, and that's one of my favorite things about this case. Now let's talk about what the A in this case stands for, and that's airflow. And really, that's what makes this case special, and what made the P400A so special to me was the fact that they really focused on getting good airflow to your components. This case does a really good job with it. To feed those 140mm fans up front, Phanteks did a really good job with the case design or the mesh design here. So instead of using like more of a circular design, we've seen some other like triangular designs over the years, they went for this like rectangular shape. And as you look closely, this actually results in them getting a 45% open rate, which is much higher than the standard 32%, which means more air can actually get to those fans and get through the system faster, which in turn reduces temperatures to your components. And if we actually just pull this panel off, it's super easy. It's just secured with magnets and little feet at the bottom, which makes things really easy to remove. We can pull that panel off. There is a really nice dust filter, again, secured with magnets. It is actually a really nice, fine dust filter. It shouldn't restrict airflow too bad, and if you do want to remove that and just go straight with the mesh, you can absolutely do that. There's no limitation there. But what's really cool about this case is the air guide system that they put in. You'll notice that the front of the case is actually not flat. So a lot of cases you'll see the mounting points for your front fans, they'll just have like a flat mounting point with a bunch of screw holes or locations that you can actually screw in. Well, what they did here was they actually made this kind of like carved out plastic shell that goes around the fans. What this does is it's designed to reduce turbulence and make those fans more effective. It's basically kind of just feeding the fans the airflow that's coming in rather than allowing for like areas to kind of create these air pockets that sometimes can happen when you have that flat face, just because the fan, if it doesn't fit the entire front of the case, which these don't because there's actually would be, you know, a lot of room here. This way the air is actually being guided to those fans, which means that air can get through your case and help with the overall temperatures of all your components. A really cool, intuitive solution, and I really like what they did here. And honestly, this front inlet system is something that I think a lot of manufacturers should copy because it does help with reducing those turbulent pockets that you would create with a lot of other cases. And as it directs that airflow to the fans, yeah, I'm all for it. Getting better cooling with just a really simple solution. It doesn't probably cost a whole lot to implement, but I really like what Phanteks did with this air guide system. Now let's talk about my experience building in this case. And honestly, Phanteks didn't disappoint. The thing I loved about the P400A besides the airflow was that it was just easy to work in, and Phanteks with their G400A did an amazing job. Everything was just super simple to work with. They used a lot of toolless designs, like removing, you know, the front mesh panel like I showed earlier. That is just toolless, secured with magnets. Same thing with the top panel. That thing just locks into place, pulls right up, makes it super easy for you to add your radiator. There's tons of room in this case too. One of the things about having a little bit of a larger case is that you don't really feel crammed. You know, when you start working with like ITX cases or even like micro ATX cases, you have this feeling where you just, can I fit everything? Is it gonna feel secure? Am I able to route the cables I want to? It just felt really smooth and easy to work with. So I don't really have any complaints there. And I think they did a really good job with some of the premium finishes, like having really nice chrome style thumb screws. The retainable thumb screws on the back, those captive screws are really nice to see. All the panels can pretty much be removed either with the retainable thumb screw or a single Phillips head screw. Like these side panels for the bottom ventilation can actually be removed right here. So if you do want to access this side of the front case, you can. It's just a single screw on the back. So again, very easy to work in. And because there's a lot of room on the back side of the case, you can pretty much tuck your cables and hide them away if you need to. Speaking of the back of the case, something I left out earlier is that this case is fully BTF and Project Zero compatible. So if you want to have a back connect motherboard, it's all designed there. The cutouts are done well. And something that a lot of other cases struggled with early on with those BTF connect motherboards and actually having support for those is it kind of cut down on the rigidity of that back plane. This one is done really well. Phanteks did a great job there. And while we're around back, let's talk about the cable management support and specifically the cable management tray system that Phanteks built in. So basically they got a tray, like a plastic attachment that goes down along the back of the case. And it's designed to kind of like route your cables to keep everything really organized and out of the way. And I think they did a good job with it. There are 3 Velcro tie down straps and it actually has quite a bit of room to actually get your cables to where they need to go. And if you follow the guides that they give you, it actually works quite well. I actually tried going not with their guides and actually went my own path with running the 24 pin. I ended up having this kind of weird angle that I had to run the cable with, but I think it turned out pretty well. So there is still some flexibility here if you do want to route your cables your own way. But I do like that they did include this just because keeping the cables nice and bunched up, keeping them going in the exact path that they need to go, which is basically either from top to bottom or bottom to top. It keeps everything pretty organized and it's a kind of an easy solution. It's not anything super complex. There's no hidden panels. It's just kind of easy to get to. And if you do need to actually go ahead and like get your cables out for whatever reason, maybe you need to change your power supply, swap out a fan, or do anything like that, it's really not going to be a problem to service, which as a technician, I have to appreciate. And then when it comes to some of the other extra features or nice to have things that I liked about this case, if we look at the front I/O, you have a power button reset switch, you have a headphone jack, that's all white. Then you have two white USB-A connectors, so those nice actually blend in quite well and they look super clean. Those are gonna be just standard USB 3.0, and then there's a Type-C port. That Type-C port isn't just a standard Type-C port, it's actually 3.2 Gen 2, which means you can get 20 gigabits through that port, and you should also have support, if your motherboard has support for it, for faster connectivity or power delivery through that port, which is nice to see. So that's definitely something I really like. I also like the fact that all those cables that come down are white. They're not gonna stand out. Really, the only black cables I have in here are add-ons. They're nothing that comes with the case. So definitely something really cool to see that all the cables that are in this case, they are very clean. They really blend in with the back panel of the case, which makes cable management just that much easier. And they don't stand out like some other cases do. There's only one issue I do have with those cables, and that has to do with the HD audio cable, because it's white all the way down to the connector. The connector happens to be white, but there's a small little portion where you see the ugly ketchup and mustard cables. I just wish Phanteks would have just had those cables. Either they could have put a piece of heat shrink over them or done something to the connector just to make sure that it was white all the way. That's just one little gripe I have with this case, and it's not a big one, but it is something I definitely want to see change. Speaking of what's back here on this back panel, and speaking of some extra features, we do have a really nice RGB strip that goes along the bottom of the case, and it's nice and diffused. Something that we didn't have for a long time when we first got introduced to like having RGB strips in cases is that they were just really bright and didn't look very good, at least not to me. I feel like they were just so much, there was so much light coming from them and not the cleanest look. You could usually tell that there was actually like the individual LED diodes, and that kind of just didn't look good to me. Now we have something like, in this case, a nice flat finish thanks to having that diffused panel across that. And that actual strip connects back either to, a standard ARGB header, just like the fans, or you can actually use the new Nexlink system. So this is something that just got introduced with this case. Same thing with the cooler that I have in here. This is another brand new cooler. It's the Glacier 1 360 M25 Gen 2. And they all connect to this new hub. This is basically their new Nexlink hub. It's a way for them to have greater control over the fan curves as well as the RGB lighting outside of just using your motherboard's control. So if you want to have more individual control of each LED for the fans, the little LED strip down below, your cooler, you can have a little more customizability. This is not included. You have to buy it separately. But I did see something that right now there is a promotion going on Instagram where I saw that Phanteks said that if you do buy this case and you happen to buy one other Phanteks product that happens to support Nexlink, they'll actually send one of these to you for free as long as you send a proof of purchase. I have no idea how long that's gonna last or even if that will actually be something long term. I hope it is, because it is a kind of a cool piece of tech to have. It's actually magnetic, it slaps together, but it makes it easier for controlling all the cables, and it doesn't have anything that has to go to the motherboard besides a single USB-A cable. So that's just one other thing that is compatible with this case. It's not included, so it's kind of hard to say or judge the case based on that. But at the $100 price point, I don't know what they're going to try to charge for the Nexlink system. I don't think it's going to be very expensive, because it doesn't seem like it's going to be that expensive of a premium feature. But definitely something that I did want to go ahead and mention, because that is really a big part of what this case will eventually be about, is if Phanteks' Nexlink system becomes more wider spread across their lineup of products, which it sounds like it is. They made a big deal about it at Computex. So definitely something to keep your eye on. And if you do end up buying this case, think about maybe also buying their brand new cooler, the Glacier 1 360 M25 Gen 2, just because that will get you one of these Nexlink hubs for free as long as you do it within whatever time frame Phanteks is talking about. So definitely cool. Just makes cable management a little bit easier for handling how all those cables run. And you can do both power for the fans and control, as well as RGB over a single connector, really is what the main benefit of having some kind of Nexlink system like this is. So definitely a cool feature that is available, but not included in the case. So definitely keep that in mind. So although I really enjoyed building in this case, there are a few things I wanted to talk about that maybe I would consider changing on maybe the next iteration of this model. First off, because it has support for BTF and Project Zero, which is really cool, and I like that that feature is included and you don't have to like get a separate case for that. It's nice for it to be there. The only problem I have is that because this case supports eATX motherboards, if you get a standard ATX board, which most motherboards are these days, you're gonna have these kind of gaps right here before the rubber grommets. And those rubber grommets are nice to have, and that's really where you wanna run your cables through. But the problem with this kind of gap there, I just don't like how you can see the cables on the reverse side of your PC case. Personally, I would have just liked it to maybe either have like a cover if you're not using those BTF connectors, or just something that kind of hid that little pass-through. Just because if you do have those cables routed back around, you kind of look at kind of the more ugly part of the cable, as that kind of gets routed into that cable channel on the backside. So either maybe cover that section if you're not using the BTF section, or if you don't have an eATX motherboard, maybe there would just be a way to kind of cover that up, or even add rubber grommets there would also be a great way to kind of make that look just a little more clean. And that's just a minor gripe with the case, but definitely something I'd maybe consider changing or finding a different way to implement. And then when it comes to cable management, although I do really like this cable tray system, the only thing is I always like running my CPU connectors along the side back of the case. The thing is, they only have 2 tie down points here to actually run that cable there. I think what they want you to do is run the cable over this way, but personally, I like the look of having it come down through the side. And just wish there was maybe another option there. There's also a lot of empty space here, so maybe they could have done some kind of channel along the side here. These are not very expensive to implement. This is just a plastic piece for that tray. So maybe another little tray on the side here for those 8-pin connectors for your CPU. That would be really cool, and definitely just, again, just a minor thing. Another thing is I wish there were a couple more tie down points. So although there's a lot of like these little loops, and there's room for you to do, these Velcro straps, I just wish for zip ties, which one thing that's kind of cool about this case is Phanteks gives you a ton of them, but there's not really a lot of places to actually zip tie things down. I mean, there's only 1 here, 2 here, this one, I guess technically 3. There's some up front, but they're not being used. So, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's probably it of points where you can actually zip tie things down. So you're really dependent on using these Velcro straps, which only have 3 points of contact. I just wish there was another location where we could tie down some cables just to keep things a little more organized. So just something else maybe that could be added. And then the other thing is, despite this case being super wide, I wish maybe we got a little bit more room on this backside. Not a ton. Just maybe a couple millimeters. It really doesn't need to be that much. But I wish we just had a little bit more than what the thickness of the cable channel was, or even make those taller, just because as we have, thicker cables, especially if you start talking about having like cable extensions or custom cables, those get a little thicker, and I wish there was just a little bit more room on the backside for this being such a big case. Now at the launch price of $100, this case is really a great value. I really feel like it lives up to the name of the P400A, which I loved so much just because of its overall build quality, case features, and price point. And at $100, I know it's more than the P400A. Everything's gone up at this point, but it's really good. Like, they didn't cut corners here. A lot of case manufacturers like to cut corners when you're under $100. So at $99.99 for the black or white version with 4 fans, that's a great value. I asked my rep at Phanteks if there was going to be one without the fans included. Doesn't sound like that's happening anytime soon. Personally, I would like to see maybe the same case without the fans, maybe for $75 or $80. This way you could do your own fan setup. I think the only reason they're not doing that is just because you kind of have to put 140 millimeter fans up front to go ahead and take advantage of those like air guides. But other than that, I still think it's a really good value. The build quality and the functionality of this case is better than any other $100 case I've worked with. And you know, even if you can compare it to something like the 4000D from Corsair, you get the one with the RGB fans. I think that's around $105. That's a really good case too. But I think the build quality on this one might be a little bit higher. I think the overall finish might be a little bit higher. I like some of the extra features that this case has that doesn't, and even some of the other manufacturers. I personally just feel like this case should be probably put in somewhere like the $125 to $150 range. So at $100, to me, it kind of feels like a steal. So definitely a really solid case, and something I personally will recommend to a lot of people as people ask, you know, what case should I get? If you don't want the fish tank look like a lot of other cases are kind of going for, and you like the traditional tower, you don't mind it being a little large, this is really the case to look at this point, especially if you got about $100 to budget for your case. So definitely my recommendations getting thrown here, and if you want to take a look at it, I'll make sure I have it linked down below. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to take a look at another Phanteks review I did a while back, the best $60 case happens to be the Phanteks XT Pro case, which is actually a really, really good value. If you don't want to spend $100, definitely a case to possibly consider. I also have more case reviews I'll also link, so if you guys want to take a look at those, go ahead and do so. And I really appreciate each of you guys for viewing this, and I'll see you guys in the next one.